This is the setting up video for two of our Brown's gas machines, the Immortal and the Superpower. Both of these machines are identical in their setting up, and they only differ in their power output in terms of the flow rate of Brown's gas. So the Immortal has an output of 3,000 millilitres per minute, and the Superpower has an output of 1,500 millilitres per minute. If we take a look at the machine from the back, there's a few things just to point out. So we have the power on and off switch here. We have the socket where you can plug the power cable into. And here we have the drainage valve where if you unscrew this, you can drain water out of the tank if you need to empty it for any reason. And here we have the indicator of how much water is in the tank. And so I have here the power cable, which comes with the machine, and I'm going to take one end, plug it into the socket, and then just plug the other end into your plug, and then we can go to the on-off switch and then turn it on. And then we just need to then turn the machine around and have a look at the front screen. Now when we turn it around, because it's on wheels, it makes it quite easy to turn. If you need to pick it up, the handles here make it easy to pick up as well. And when we turn it all the way around, what you can see is a little flashing light under or above where it says power. And in a moment, when I switch it on, there will be 5 long bleeps. And those 5 long bleeps indicate that the machine needs to be filled up. So once the machine is filled up with water and you switch it on after that, then it won't have those bleeps. So it's only there the first time you switch it on or if the tank is empty. So if I switch that on, and all you do is hold your finger or your thumb over that icon, pressing onto it for about 2 or 3 seconds, and then you should hear the bleeps. So there we go, we've got 5 long bleeps and the machine is on. You can see all the icons. So this machine has a lovely large screen. It's all touch sensitive, and it's a machine which is very easy to use, and we're going to outline all of that as we go through the video. So we can see on the screen that there's one icon here which is flashing, and it actually says low water. So this is another indicator that you need to fill the tank up. And if you try to start the machine without enough water in it, nothing's going to happen. So if I try pressing the start button here, nothing happens. So it's great that you have a machine which has a lot of built-in technology. It won't allow you to switch it on or operate it if there's something that needs attention, and that will be indicated by one of the flashing lights on the screen. So we're now ready to fill the tank up in the machine with distilled water. And the quality of distilled water is really important. So I'm going to spend a moment just explaining how important it is and what you can do to make sure that the water you put into your machine is as good as you can get. Now, a lot of you won't have your own water distiller and will probably buy your water either from the internet or from some other place, and that's absolutely fine, but you need to understand that the quality of distilled water will vary even when you make it yourself. So starting with distilled water that you might make yourself. So I have a distiller, and one of the advantages of that is I can then store it in something like this, which is a glass bottle. And obviously storing things in glass these days is considered much healthier than storing something in plastic, because there's all this idea that you've got all these plastic toxins getting into the environment and into our bodies. But if you buy something which is from the internet or from a shop, you can use distilled water, or you can use what is often called deionized water. And deionized water you can buy from garages, and you can buy it from supermarkets, usually in the car section. And regardless of what you buy, you want to test it first, and which is why we put, with our machines, one of these meters in there. Now, the meter that I'm using here is the one that we currently put in with the machine, and it will vary. So if it doesn't look exactly like this, then it will still have the same function on it. But when you switch this on, you'll be able to take your distilled water and you'll be able to test it to see if the total dissolved solids, which is TDS, is 0 parts per million. Now, if you make your own distilled water, as I do, and it's not 0, you can simply put it back into the distiller and distill it a second time, and then it should be 0 parts per million. If you buy a water from the internet or anywhere else, you definitely want to test it with one of these first. And we have had various people contact us who have bought water from the internet, they've tested it, and it's been in the region of the same as tap water. So it's been kind of like 50 parts per million or worse than that. And so there's a lot of distilled water which isn't genuine, and even genuine distilled water doesn't guarantee that it's going to be 0 parts per million. And generally speaking, most distilled water will be anywhere between 0 to about 3 or 4, even 5. And that's still distilled water, still being distilled in the right way. It's just that some processes, some distillers are better than others. And this machine here can still run on water which has anywhere up to about 5 parts per million in terms of the total dissolved solids. The problem is that over time that will age the machine, it will shorten its lifespan. So if you want your machine to make hydrogen at the most optimal and efficient rate, and the lifespan of your machine to last the longest possible with less kind of drop-off in performance, then the water quality is of the utmost importance. And if you really pay attention to getting anywhere, I would say, between 0 and 1, that would be what I would be looking to put into the machine. So I'm going to take some of this distilled water, I'm going to put it into a glass and I'm going to test it, and I'm going to test it against just normal tap water that I've filtered through a normal standard filter. I'm just going to show you the difference. So quite often when you get distilled water which is actually 0, sometimes the process of transferring it from one place to another, it picks up dust and little contaminants, which is why genuine 0 distilled water can sometimes test as 1. And so let's see what this one tests at. So on here, I've just switched it on, and this has got multiple functions on it. So I need to change the mode until it says parts per million, ppm, and then just put that into here. And that's actually coming up quite badly at the moment. So can you see that's coming up at a 4. So if you stir it around, you'll get a better reading, but then let it settle. So that's actually settling at a 2 now. So once you've stirred it, it kind of gives you a better reading. So yeah, it's coming up at a 2 and a 1 now that it's settled. If I do the same with just tap water that's been filtered, we can see in there we're getting a reading. If I stir it and let it settle, it's over 70. And sometimes the reason why, if I put that back into here, because I've had it into this water, I've actually contaminated this water by testing that water first. So this can actually put the reading up. But this is testing consistently at 2. And for the purposes of this demonstration, 2 is going to allow the machine to run. And ideally, though, I would actually throw that water away and make some new water. And the reason why that's probably come up as a 2 is because I will often fill a tank up, test a machine, and then drain it and put it back into the bottle. And the more times I do that, the more times it picks up little contaminations just from transferring it from jug to water bottle back into the machine again. So hopefully you can understand that the purity of the water is absolutely paramount. Try and keep it between 0 and 1, and don't get too complacent and think, okay, the machine will run if it's a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or even a 5 or slightly more, but you are actually having a detrimental effect on the machine and its lifespan. So I'm ready now to transfer some of this water into the machine, and what we can do is we turn anti-clockwise the cap, and that comes out, and this has got an orange stopper because the idea is that has to be airtight, and then underneath there is a filter, and this is basically a carbon filter, and what it does is it helps to keep the water inside the machine pure. So if there is little bits of contamination that somehow gets into the machine, this helps to keep it cleaner. So I can put that just in a glass so it's out the way, and you could pour your water straight from the bottle straight into the machine. The chances are though it can sometimes get a bit messy and water spills over the edges of the machine, so if you do have something like a funnel, it's worth utilising. If you can put it into a jug first, which has got a little lip like this, just makes it that little bit easier to fill the machine up. And then you can keep an eye on the meter and you can fill it up. Now, it might take a number of jugs to do that. And so at the moment, you can probably see the water level coming up slightly on the machine. Now, if you overfill this, the machine won't work. And I'm going to deliberately overfill this so you can then find out what to do if it happens to you. Now, sometimes you can fill it up to maximum and it's not too full, but as soon as you put this back in, it will displace some of the water and push it up a little bit higher, and then all of a sudden there's too much water in the machine. And when there's too much water, this will actually start to flash. So at the moment, let's keep adding water, and we'll see. If we can get to that point. Whoops, there we go. Okay, so it's going to need a little bit more than that. So I'm going to continue filling that until it's overfilled. So I've continued to add water to the machine, and once I reached the point where there was too much water, there was a couple of pings that came from the machine, but you can also see that this is flashing. And that tells you straight away that there's too much water in the machine. And what I'm going to do now is show you how to drain some of that water out. Now, before I actually drain some of the water out, I'm going to turn the machine around again. And what you'll be able to see, if I zoom in a little bit onto the screen, is there'll be an indicator which is here, which is saying water full, and now that's flashing. So when we switched the machine on, there was 5 long bleeps and the water was low, so this was flashing, and now we've got water full. And when we tested the water that I put in, it was coming up between 1 to 2 parts per million in terms of its total dissolved solids, or TDS. The machine has its own TDS meter here, and ideally you want it to be flashing in the green. Now, the TDS meter, which is in the machine, is not as sensitive as the one that we add to your package, which is this. And if you get a really bad distilled water and you didn't test it, the chances are, if it's only 3, 4, 5, 6 parts per million, the machine would still flash in the green, indicating that it's clean. But in the interest of the longevity of the machine, using this meter first to make sure that it's as close to zero as you can get is the key thing to protect your machine. So this meter is less sensitive, and I would say that just because this indicates green doesn't mean that the water is pure enough to extend the lifespan of your machine. So I just wanted to make that kind of really hammered home, the importance of water purity. So yes, we've got the water tank indicating that it's full, and we're going to show you now how to drain some off. When it comes to draining the water out, I'm going to take the funnel away, and I'm just going to put this cap back in and then just screw it up nice and tight so it's water sealed. And there's a reason for that, and you'll see the reason in a moment. Now, the manufacturers put in the accessories one of these. It says drain tube on it. And the way that they suggest that you drain it is you unscrew and take the plug out, which I'll show you in a moment, and then you attach this onto the end, and then you can drain it through the tube into a jug or something like that. I actually found that that's not the easiest way to do it. The easiest way is what I'm going to show you now. So I've got my jug here, and what I'm going to do is just hold this underneath, and I'm going to unscrew the cap and just take it off. And the reason I hold the jug there is just in case there was a little bit of water that just came out. And then you can see there's a green plug. And if I take that green plug out, which looks like that, there was a little bit of water that came out, and then it stopped. And the reason it stopped is because the tank is airtight, especially when you've got the cap on. So all I need to do now is just release the cap a little bit, and it's like a tap. I can release, let some water come out, and then when I want to stop the flow, it's almost like turning the tap on and off. So I just need to release enough water until this stops flashing. And that's already stopped flashing. However, it might very well be that if I was to put the water filter in, it could push the water back up over the level where it's too high. So I'm going to drain just a little bit more water out. And there we go. Put the little green stopper back in, nice and tight. Screw that back on. And now if I put the filter back in, we are there. So we've got a nice full tank, we've got the filter back in, we put the top screwed back on quite firmly, doesn't have to be too tight, and you now know the easiest way to drain either a little bit of water out, or if you needed to drain the whole tank, you could do it in exactly the same way. So the final setting up is simply to go to the accessories and get the following pieces. So you've got 2 long bits of white tubing, 2 very short pieces of clear tubing, which is much thicker. You have this Y adapter, and you have these 2 humidifier bottles. And what we're going to simply do is put some distilled water into these bottles, and then they will sit into these little attachments here, and then we attach them with these into these output sockets, and then we use these white bits to plug onto the front. So what you might also notice is that the machine has gone into standby mode. So if the machine is sitting idle, it's a bit like a screensaver really, so it just that line there, and you can just bring it back to normal screen just by touching any of the buttons, and there you go, and it will bring the screen back on. So yes, you put distilled water into the machine and you put distilled water into these humidifier bottles. And you may not see this on the camera because it's quite faint, but there is a minimum and a maximum mark indicated on the bottle. And when you fill them up with distilled water, you don't fill it up to the maximum, you fill it to the point midway, roughly, between maximum and minimum. So all you do is unscrew the bottle, and this is where a jug or a cup is easier than using a big bottle. So I'm just going to fill that roughly to halfway. And it doesn't have to be exact. Screw that back on, nice and firm, and then we do the same with the other one. Now these humidifier bottles do need to be airtight. So if you just do them too lightly, then you can get some air escaping and you lose pressure. So it doesn't have to be so tight that it's difficult to undo, but you do need to have it quite firmly tightened. And I'm then going to put a bit of tubing on the top. So I can just slot that in there. Same with the other one. And then slot it on there. Now, depending on the machine and when you buy it, some of the machines, when they come from the manufacturer, will have a cap which you need to take off. And if I just twist that cap, it looks like that. Just a little rubber cap which is over the output valve. And that's only a recent thing. So some of the machines will have that cap and some of them won't. So if you have a cap, take that off, and obviously the same on the other one. And then you just plug your tubing into there. And if I zoom in a little bit closer, you can actually see that one of these is the output O2, which is the oxygen, and one of these is H2, which is the hydrogen. So when you're using the machine, if you wanted to use only hydrogen, you can not attach this and just attach your cannula straight to that nozzle. But when you want to use it as Brown's gas, and Brown's gas is a combination of hydrogen and oxygen, you then need to use the tubing, and we put a bit of tubing onto the front of each of these. And then we take that Y adapter, which we have here, and we take each of these and plug it into the Y adapter. And that's basically just combining the hydrogen and the oxygen together into one output. And then onto the output here, you can plug in your water stone or your cannula. So that's what we're going to do next. But essentially, the machine is ready to go. But before we actually do that, I'm going to show you the screen. So starting with this top line here, you can see where it says flow, you've got these kind of moving icons, and that basically tells you that you're in standby mode. When I switch it on in a moment, because this is the Immortal machine, which has an output of 3 litres per minute or 3,000 millilitres per minute, that will come up with the output, the flow rate. The machine comes automatically with a 30-minute on the timer, but you can adjust that by using here where it says timer, and if I press that, you can increase the time, and you can keep increasing it all the way up to 4 hours, and then it comes back to 30 minutes again. You use this button here to start and stop the machine. We've already used this one as the main power on button, and there's also a night mode, and pressing that button initially dims the screen, but once it's running, within a minute or so, the whole machine will go dark. So if you were using this during the night and you didn't want any, there it is, it's gone completely dark, and you didn't want any lights kind of keeping you awake, the machine would run with a completely dark screen, and then just pressing any of the buttons will bring it back on, but in a much dimmer display brightness, and then you can bring it back to its normal mode by pressing it again. And along the bottom here, we have a number of indicators. This one here says filter. So the filter that's in the machine will need to be changed anywhere between generally 6 to 12 months. And it depends obviously on how long your sessions are and how frequently they are as to maybe how quickly the filter might need to be changed. And when it does need to be changed, this will flash, and this will indicate that the filter needs to be changed. If for any reason the water in the tank needs to be changed, this is a good thing just for general maintenance. So you can just keep topping the water up in the little humidifier bottles at the front and in the tank as they go down. It's a good idea to fill the tank up before the display here tells you that the water is too low. If you keep the water, generally speaking, on the higher level towards being full, the machine operates much more efficiently, and you produce a much more towards its optimum output, and you'll find that it helps to extend the lifespan of the machine when there's more water flowing through the machine. But you could, if you wanted to, just use the machine until this water indicator tells you that you need to top it up. That's fine if you want to do that. But periodically, it's a good idea to just empty all the water out and just put brand new water in. What that does is it kind of just flushes the tank out, and it's another just kind of safeguard to keeping the machine so that it doesn't build up any contamination. So even though the machine is using up water and you're topping it back up again, just kind of emptying the whole tank and putting clean water in is a nice way of flushing out any impurities that could be in there. So there's a number of things that this machine will do to keep that water quality pure. So one of them is obviously monitoring the TDS, which is total dissolved solids, and that's why we put that little meter in with your machine so you can test the water, make sure it's as close to zero as possible before you operate the machine. We've then got that carbon filter that's in the machine. When you take the cap off, remember we took that carbon filter out so we could put the water into the machine. That helps to keep the water clean. And we've also got the occasional flushing of the tank, and that'll just be periodically. So it's not going to be kind of like very often that you need to do that, but it's just something that might happen once every 3 or 4 months, depending on how much you use it. So yes, change water. We've then got overheat. Now, if for any reason the machine was getting a bit too hot, then this would indicate the machine would automatically switch itself off, and it wouldn't allow you to use it until it's cooled down. And this is just making sure that the machine doesn't damage itself, and this is only really likely to be an issue if you're in a room where you've got this sitting very close to something like a radiator or a heat source, or in direct sunlight, and these are things that we recommend that you shouldn't do. So keep it away from any external heat sources. Keep it in a relatively shaded and cool place. But if for any reason, maybe there's lots of people using it and the machine gets a bit overheated, it's self-protecting. It will indicate and it will switch itself off. And the last one here is called unbalance, and this is simply to do if the machine is not sitting flat enough. So at the moment the machine is on a flat surface, and it can tolerate a degree of being on an uneven surface, but if the machine is not flat enough, then a little alarm will go off. If the machine was running, it would switch off and it wouldn't be able to start again until it was on a flat enough surface. And so that's all the unbalanced is. So if you want to make hydrogen or Brown's gas water, you're going to need from your accessories the water stone, which looks like this, and a bit of white tubing, which is the same tubing as we have here. So I'm going to show you first how to make Brown's gas water. So I'm going to attach the tubing to one end of here, and the other end I go to that output here and we attach it onto there. So now the water stone is connected to both the outputs, and I'm going to use just simple water from a filter jug. Now, when it comes to making Brown's gas or even hydrogen water, you can use more or less any water in the glass that you want. So you could use spring water, mineral water, you could use distilled water if you want to, but we just recommend not using tap water. So there's quite a lot of impurities in tap water, and that could cause some degree of reaction with the Brown's gas or even hydrogen. So I'm just going to put the water stone into there. And then I'm just going to leave it on 30 minutes, and I'm just going to press start. Now you might be able to hear there's a sound of water moving and the sound of a motor kind of running. That indicates the machine is working. And then what we'll start to see is water bubbling in here, and then sometimes a bit later in here. So the hydrogen tends to come through very quickly, and the oxygen comes through sometimes up to a minute later. And obviously the hydrogen is going to be a bit more powerful with the bubbling than the oxygen. And the reason for that is the output of hydrogen to oxygen is a 2-to-1 ratio. So there's twice as much output into here as there is into the oxygen. And so if both of these are bubbling, then you know that you've got output. And then you can see absolutely with the water in the glass that we have a lovely output of gas into the water. And this is really, really powerful. So this is the Immortal machine. This is 3,000 millilitres per minute. And you can actually see on the screen here, it says 3.0 and it's litres per minute. That's the full flow rate coming through this machine. Now, depending on your machine, people will often say, how long should I leave that to bubble for? And the general answer is 3 to 5 minutes. But in a machine as powerful as this, you'll probably only need to do it really a minute to 2 minutes, because you've got 3 times more output with the Immortal than you have from our least powerful machine, which is called the Vitality. That only has an output of 1,000 compared to 3,000. So 3 minutes on the Vitality machine, you can get that same amount of hydrogen with just 1 minute on this machine. Now, one of the things that you'll get to know after a while is you'll get to know what the power level of your machine looks like. So if for any reason over the lifespan of your machine you notice that the bubbles aren't as powerful either in these little bottles here or even in the glass, then you know that something might be impacting the performance of your machine. Now, the machines are designed to have a 5,000 hour lifespan before they start to see any drop-off in performance. So these machines will last for a long, long time after that 5,000 hours, but there can be a gradual drop-off in performance. Now, if you want to have the best performance that is possible and extend that performance beyond that, this is why we make such a big deal about the quality of the water that you put into the machine. So trying to get that really high quality, 0 parts per million distilled water into your machine, and don't be complacent and use 2, 3, 4, 5 parts per million. Even if the indicator here says it's okay, it will make a difference over the lifespan of your machine, and you'll be glad that you paid attention to that water quality. I'm going to switch the machine off just by pressing the stop button. And what you'll notice is, even though I've pressed stop, there's still bubbling in the glass here. And that's because there's still a lot of gas kind of in the system, which will just kind of gradually come to a stop. Now, you could, if you wanted to, wait for it to completely stop bubbling, but you can just drink the water and just give that time to kind of go through its course. Now, if all you were doing was making some water, or even if you'd finished using it for inhalation, it's suggested that you don't just press stop and then power down and then switch it off at the back straight away. What the machine likes to do is it likes to have a couple of minutes just to kind of allow all the gas to kind of come through, and then there can be some kind of cooling down that happens. And so this is why the machine might sound as if there's still things happening for a minute or so after you finish using it, and that's completely normal. So the suggestion is, when you do finish any kind of use of the machine, wait for a couple of minutes and then switch it off at the power here. And it's a good idea to always switch it off on the main switch at the back as well. So these are just little things that just means that your machine's longevity is going to be at its absolute maximum potential. There might be some people out there who would prefer to have just hydrogen water, and you could probably work this out for yourself. All you do is detach the stone, and all I'm going to do is unplug that one there, and just plug the water stone directly into the hydrogen. And then if I press start, I'm now making just hydrogen water. And again, whenever you switch it on, it takes a bit of time for the hydrogen to be produced. Now, the oxygen is still being produced, it's just that it's not going through the water stone. So this is the way that you would make just pure hydrogen. So now I'm going to take you through how to use the cannula. So this is primarily what this machine is designed for. It's to breathe in either hydrogen or Brown's gas. And so this is the cannula that we supply with it, and it's a very high quality cannula. So we've got one end which plugs into the machine, and then if you follow it, you get a little cylinder like this, and this is not something that you need to fill up with anything. It's called a water catcher, and what it does is it catches kind of water droplets and any condensation, and means that that condensation doesn't get to the nasal bit and you end up breathing it in. So one of the things to just explain about any kind of machine that makes oxygen or hydrogen, and in this case Brown's gas is both, is that there's a tendency in these machines to have condensation accumulate in the cannula. And that's just the natural thing that occurs. It's not a fault of the machine or anything like that. Now, the more powerful the machine, the greater the potential build-up of condensation. So when people have very low-powered machines, and some of the really low-powered machines, which are still therapeutic, can be in the region of an output of just maybe 120 millilitres per minute, compared to something like this, which is 3,000. those kind of low entry-level powered machines are unlikely to ever have a problem with condensation because they're just not powerful enough. However, with machines like this, some of the things that you can see are sometimes a spitting that comes out of the kind of the connectors, and you can also find that over time this can actually get filled up with condensation and actual water. So if you actually do need to empty that, you'll see, if you look closely, there's two arrows that line up, and the thing you can do is just twist, pull it apart, empty the water, and then just twist it back on again. So it's not difficult to do, and it's the reason why that's there is because condensation is a natural part of this sort of system. So what I'm going to do is get the Y adapter with that output and just connect it to the end of the cannula. And if you wanted to test that the cannula was actually working, or you just wanted to test that your machine was working, the easiest way to test if the machine is working is to use the water stone, because if you get bubbling into here, and then you put your water stone into some water, you'll see all that lovely bubbling. And if for any reason there isn't all that powerful bubbling, then you know something isn't quite right. But you can do the same thing with your cannula. So now that I've attached it, I'm going to press the start. I'm going to wait until these are both bubbling. And then I'm going to take the nasal part of the cannula and I'm going to dunk it in the water. And there you can see there's bubbling. And that tells me that the cannula is working absolutely fine. Now, some people notice that if you pay attention, it looks like the bubbles are only coming out of one nose bit, and that's normal. So it doesn't mean there's a bit that's broken there. So if it looks like the bubbles are coming out of one of the nasal tubes and not the other, for some reason, maybe there's a physics principle involved there, but that's absolutely normal. And so if you then wanted to put the cannula on, essentially you can see that there are the two bits that go into your nostrils, and then there's a little green flap, a little flat piece, and that actually points down towards your lips. So you put the two bits into your nostrils and this points down towards your lips, and then you would wrap around the ears. So you don't put it over the back of your head, it wraps around the ears to keep it into place. There's a couple of things that the manufacturers state would be good times to empty the tank and then put new water back in. So if for any reason you put some water into the tank, and we've had people who have done this by mistake, where they've put either just tap water or normal water in, and the indicator on the machine has come up in the orange or the red, then obviously you would empty the tank and put fresh water in. But a good thing to then do is once you've put the clean water in, you then empty the tank again, because that second water, which is clean, actually helps to flush any extra impurities out. The other thing is, obviously, if you're traveling with the machine, always empty it. And the packaging that comes with this machine is worth keeping, because if you move house or you want to take it to another work venue, if you're a therapist or some other place, the box that comes with it is the best way to package it up. But do make sure that you empty it of water and don't try to do the traveling with the water in the tank. And the other thing is, if for any reason on the indicators the overheat was to come up, it's suggested that it's a good idea to completely empty the tank and put new water in. So these are a couple of times where the manufacturer has said these are times to empty the tank out. So obviously if you're traveling, if you have a problem with putting the wrong water in, so you empty the water and then fill it again and empty it, and then put the water in after that is the one that you use. And One final time when it's a good idea to empty the tank and replace the water is if the machine for any reason isn't producing any output. And this is something we haven't encountered. We test every machine before we send them out, and if it was to happen that for some reason your machine stopped working, the first thing that you could try before contacting us would be to empty the tank, replace the water, and then see if that helps. So when it comes to the nasal cannulas, if you need new cannulas, you can order them on our website. But we do have a document which is on our website which tells you everything you need to know about maintaining, cleaning, and when to replace your cannula. So find the website and the document on there. If you can't find it, then just send us a message and we will send you a link to it. So once you've got your machine set up and you're quite familiar on how to use it, the first question that people ask us is, how often and how long should I use the machine for? And we can't give specific personalized programs, as we have to be careful that we're not seen to be using the machine in a way that specifically is treating illnesses and diseases. And so we have created a general protocol. And the general protocol is based on a lot of information that we have collected from various sources. And you can get that protocol on our website, and we often will send a link to it when you purchase the machine. But if for any reason you haven't received that or you can't find it on the website, again, feel free to contact us and we will send you a link to it. And the basics of the protocol are to start gently and to build up the time. Now, a lot of people who buy the Immortal machine, such as this one, are often surprised at how powerful it is. And to put it into some perspective, you need to understand that when we suggest starting with just 10 minutes, it may seem that 10 minutes isn't a lot, but because of the incredibly high output of hydrogen and oxygen in the forms of Brown's gas, in that 10 minutes, you're going to get the equivalent of a 30-minute session on our least powerful machine, which is the Vitality, which only has an output of 1,000. So this is 3 times stronger. If you were someone who has previously had an inhalation machine but was from another company and only had an output of, say, 150, then you could be on that particular device for several hours and still not get the output of 10 minutes on this machine. So it's really important to respect your body and to start off gently. And the protocol will suggest that if you're using the Immortal, you start with 10 minutes. And if you're using the Superpower machine, which is half the power output of the Immortal, then you double the time. You can start at 20 minutes. And what you do is you have a day of recovery between each session. And what we've found, okay, is that when you have that day of recovery, it actually improves the effectiveness of the hydrogen therapy. And the reason for that seems to be that daily use, although it might seem more advantageous, seems to create a bigger detox burden on your liver and your kidneys. And by having that recovery between each session that you do on the machine, you'll find that you don't accumulate stress on your liver and your kidneys. And this is particularly important when someone has an illness or a disease which makes them very weak. So there are a lot of people who are very frail, very weak, very fatigued. And what we don't want you to do is to go in with 30, 40, 50 or 60 minutes on this machine and then do it every day and then wonder why at the end of a week or two, rather than feeling better, you've actually made yourself feel quite bad. And what you'll find, okay, is that these machines are very, very, very strong. So respect that 10 minutes is a strong session. Have your day of recovery and then let the body experience more of that, and then follow the protocol as we've outlined and gradually build it up, and you'll find that you will get incredible results from these machines. So I just wanted to go through a couple of miscellaneous bits of information that some of you might find useful at some point. So the first thing is, when it comes to how often you need to top up the water. Now, this is going to vary based on a couple of factors. So obviously, if you're using the machine every day, which some people actually will do, then you're going to use up more water more quickly than someone that's using it alternate days. And the longer your sessions are, obviously you'll be using up more water than someone that's doing shorter sessions. So it's very difficult to say this is how often you need to top the water up. Obviously, the machine itself will tell you if it gets too low, but the more powerful the machine, the quicker you're going to be using up water. And then when you add in how frequently you're using the machine and how long your sessions are, it's going to vary quite considerably from person to person. So remember, there's two things that you might need to top up. One of them is the actual tank itself, and then you've got also these two little humidifier bottles. And these are the things that sometimes, depending how long your sessions are, you might need to sometimes top up after each session, which is just a very small amount of water. And it's quite common for the oxygen one to go down quicker than the hydrogen. Now, I don't know exactly why that is, but it's just something that I've noticed. And in some instances, it might be that this one needs to be topped up after every session, and this one less so, maybe after every 2 or 3 sessions. But just watch the bottles, keep them, generally speaking, between the midpoint, between the minimum and the maximum. Another thing which we've had a couple of feedbacks about are, if you overfill these or let them drop too low, then you get a reduced power output. And there's been a couple of times where people have contacted us and they've said that when they attach their water stone and then place it into the water, there's no power. There's no bubbles coming through the water stone. And in every single occasion where that's happened, it's been one of two things. It's either been that the water in the humidifier bottle is too high or too low. So the first thing that we'll get them to do is just re-establish that midline with the water. And if that doesn't work, the second thing is that they probably haven't done the screws up tight enough on the caps. So just give it a little bit of a tighten, and it's usually because there's air getting out and the seal isn't tight enough. And if you do both of those, then usually the power starts to come back through the water stone again. And if the water stone wasn't producing enough power, then you weren't getting your full impact through the cannula either, even though there was probably gas being produced. If there's a long period of time where you're not using the machine, it's a good idea to leave it with water in the tank. And the reason for that is you want to keep the part of the machine that makes the hydrogen, which is known as the hydrolysis cell, you want to keep it soaked so it doesn't dry out. So if you haven't used the machine for, say, a month or longer, then keep water in the machine, but then the manufacturer suggests that when you go back and start using it again, just replace the water that's in the tank because it's just been sitting there. So just empty the tank and replace it with clean water. And again, these are just ways of safeguarding your machine and just making sure that the longevity is preserved. Another interesting factor for anyone that lives in a building where there is a carbon monoxide detector, hydrogen can set off, if it goes high enough, carbon monoxide detectors. And one of the things, particularly with these Immortal machines, where there'll be a lot of hydrogen or Brown's gas, not just going into your body, but going into the surrounding environment, it's good to be in a well-ventilated place. So open a window and make sure there's good ventilation. And if you're in a place where there's a carbon monoxide sensor alarm, then you need to bear in mind that this could trigger it. And you might want to make sure you're in a different room with the window open and shut all the doors so it doesn't get to trigger that sensor.